Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Pageau.
The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by MediaClip, Photo Finale, Advertech Inc., Got Photo, and the IPI Member Network. Hello again, and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Pageau, and today we're joined by Jeremy Wills, the Senior Market Analyst from Futuresource, based in St. Albans in the UK. He is the Senior Market Analyst for Pro AV, Pro Lighting, and Imaging. Hello, Jeremy. How are you today?
Hi, Gary. How are you doing? I'm very good, thanks. On this, what's getting to be a rather sort of dusky day here in the UK.
So for our audience who aren't familiar with Futuresource, can you kind of give us a short brief on what the company does and the areas they cover? I know it's a big company and you cover a sector within that company.
Sure. I mean, Futuresource is, we're a tech-focused analyst firm, and we've been established about 30 years now, completely independent, based in the UK, but with global coverage. And within technology, basically what we focus on is and which is how we started, is content, so music, film, TV, photo, gaming, etc. How that content is either delivered to consumers or business users. So the delivery systems, which have gone from physical to digital over many years, but often still hardware based as well. And then the equipment which is used to deliver that content, as I say, be it consumer or professional, to the end users. And we have two major analyst teams in the company. One is B2C and consumer electronics. They were quite tied up with I can't think of the name of the trade show that's on in Vegas at the moment. That's the one, or the online version of that at the moment. And I sit in a B2B side of the business, which includes photo printing, which we've covered as a company for about 20 years now.
Great. So your primary area of focus is the UK and Western Europe. Can you kind of give us an overview of the size of the market and the areas in which you cover?
Sure. I mean, nowadays we cover the top 6 markets in Western Europe. Used to have wider coverage than that, but these top 6 markets in Western Europe, France, Benelux, Germany, Italy, Spain, and here the UK, they account for about 80% of Western European photo output value. So they're the lion's share of the market. And I guess that's one of the reasons why we've consolidated into looking at them. If you look at the market as in value terms, then in 2019, 2020, we're looking at about a 3.1 billion euro business, and this is consumer ordered photo product, nothing in terms of professional photo or schools photos, purely or products ordered by consumers, either in store or online, from a PC, tablet, app, whatever it may be. So it's not an insignificant business at all, and it's in recent years started to exhibit a little bit of growth again, as the dynamics in the overall market change slightly. And the Millennials and Gen Z, who are, I guess, digital natives, start to show a bit of interest in physical media, vinyl, photo prints, even cassettes, I believe. Not quite sure about hipsters and typewriters, but certainly a lot of physical things. Yeah.
Well, I won't be interested until they bring back the 8-track tape. That's where I'm coming from. So let's talk a little bit about, you said you don't cover the consumer area, or you only cover the consumer area, but I find it interesting from a technology standpoint on the back end. There's a lot of crossover between the commercial market and the consumer market in terms of the equipment being used, the platforms being used, the media that is sent to the devices. And I see that as an interesting growth opportunity for those commercial businesses who want to expand their market into commercial or into consumer. Are you seeing any of that over there?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the print service provider landscape, then yes, I mean, it's something that that's been going on for a while, and I guess maybe plateaued a little bit, but
Mhm.
there's still an interest for, from commercial print companies to, to get into the photo landscape. They see opportunities maybe in wall
Sure.
decor, in photo cards, which in some
Mhm.
Western European markets are hugely significant, and had a massive spike last year because all of a sudden with lockdown people couldn't go to a bricks and mortar retailer and buy a card. So whether it's a personalized photo product or just purely a web to print card, all of that was coming into play. But yes, and I think that on the on the PSP side of things is driven by proliferation of digital press as well.
Yeah.
There's a wider landscape of presses available in the market now,
Mhm.
and you know as you know there is a bit of a move on the pro and school side of the business as well, from silver halide to digital press,
Right.
then so it plays into the hands of existing incumbent players, but also
Mhm.
commercial print companies that might be looking for other verticals,
Mhm.
even in this what I would consider to be a relatively mature overall photo market to throw their hat into the ring. I think
Sure.
the caveat to that is you've got to have a really good front end partnership.
Right.
If you look at the likes of some of this very successful PSPs, they've got a multiplicity of retail, e-tail, app partners
Mhm.
that are established. You've got to either have your own in-house vertically integrated front end, which is robust, or you've got to have as a white label printing provider, the custom base that can have the expertise in
Mhm.
driving the front end of the business
Mhm.
and reaching the consumers, because that's
Mhm.
really where it's all at, and that's the battleground that's being played out now between the existing e-tailers who've been around for 20-30 years and sort of
Right.
riding on the dot-com boom bubble from years ago and bringing their customers with them. The photo boxes and our bellies of this world here in Western Europe, similar
Yeah.
to Shutterfly in the USA, and then the up and coming apps which are sort of biting at their heels a little bit,
Sure.
even if they're not really generating huge volumes at this stage.
You touched on a very interesting point, because photo was kind of in its own little world because of silver halide. It was a very
Mm,
specific type of technology. There was a lot of nuance to it. If you were a big silver halide lab, you had to have chemists on staff, and things like there was paper handling, there was way to deal with dark rooms, and
mhm,
preserving color fastness, and all those various things. And as digital came into play, it kind of removed that distinction of the difference in the platform. And as we see, media from an inkjet standpoint specifically approaching silver halide in terms of look, feel, and some would say they've already surpassed that. I think that it does open up the opportunity for a lot more people to play in the market. Now, whether the pie is going to grow fast enough to accommodate all those players, I think, is another thing. I thought it was an interesting trend, and I know we saw it here in the US a couple years ago with Shutterfly before they were taken private. They were trying to make a big push into commercial printing, right? Because they kind of went at it the other way. They said,
mm.
gosh, we've got all these indigos, we may as well do some brochures.
Yeah,
you know
indeed, and I think that's certainly something we've seen. If you look at Europe's largest white label, incredibly successful print service provider, Save, the German company, they've got a company that they acquired a few years ago called Saxon Print, which is purely
right.
a web to print, if you like, PSP.
Mhm.
Within their overall infrastructure now. So there has been that kind of from some players there has been that kind of pushback. If you look at Vistaprint, who are obviously active in the USA as well, they are hugely successful every year in terms of photo calendars, mugs, that kind of item. But again, very much balanced with being a huge web to print provider overall. So yeah, there's been a little bit of fluidity in both directions
Mhm.
when it comes to that.
I think it's really, though, the graphic arts and printing companies that have had more success infiltrating photo than the other way around.
Indeed, definitely the case. Yeah, I can think of, going back the last 10 years ago, whether it's startups or you can look, if you look at wall decor, it's quite easy to start up with some large format printers.
Right.
Obviously, when it gets to digital presses and that aspect of the business, it becomes a much higher,
Mhm.
route to market cost. but there's been some success stories there, with some of these companies that have added that string to their bow. I mean, here in the UK, there have been some new web to print card companies that have emerged in the last 2 or 3 years that are, it started with web to print cards, got into photo personalized cards using, print service providers which don't come from the photo background, but have the same digital presses and the same wherewithal to deliver and dispatch that product as the white label, printers of this world, such as, for instance, Harrier here in the UK, Fujifilm, Siwi, and Orvo in Germany are some of these major Western European white label photo labs, print service providers.
So let's talk a little bit about the photo card market, because I think in the UK, that's actually one of the more interesting areas, because you've got some very interesting kind of vertical players in that market. Can you talk a little bit about the size of the market and where that business is coming from, whether it's app or website?
Sure. I mean, the UK, we're completely mad on greetings cards in the UK. I think a little bit mirrored by what happens in the Benelux market as well, and one or two other countries in the world like Australia. But that's played into the hands of some of the online web to print and photo prints card players. So here in the UK we have Moonpig, who are overall I would say market leader, but we've got Funky Pigeon. There's a company called the Dogs Doodahs, which is typically British humour, and then one or two newer players, there's a company called Thoughtful, which has come to the market in the last 2 or 3 years, that started with web to print and has more recently gone into personalized photo. And then tangentially you have some of the existing photo players. I mean, Moonpig is part of the overall Photo Box group, but you've got the other brands in the Photo Box group. When it comes to multi-pack cards, which are less popular in the UK but certainly very popular in some European markets, then you have the likes of Vistaprint and Albelly and some of the others, the whole sort of Planet Card empire from France, which took over Wunderkarten and Bonnie Prints in Germany a few years ago, involved in that part of the market as well. I mean, collectively in Western Europe, it's cards wise, you're looking at about 220 odd million euro. That's the wrong one. 230 odd million euro business in 2019, and it definitely spiked in 2020 because of as I said earlier on, the fact that people just couldn't get into bricks and mortar retailers for a while in the early months of last year. So we think that's actually given the both the web to print and the photo card business a bit of a boost, if you like, because that spike isn't necessarily going to be mirrored in growth from 2021 and beyond, but it will carry on with that acceleration that comes off that boost from 2019 to 2020. So, when the market grew by, what are we looking at here? Probably about 7 or 8%, as opposed to sort of 1 or 2% a year it had been growing at in previous years. And that 1 or 2 doesn't sound great, but that's collectively across all 6 markets. Within those individual markets, you've got different dynamics going on in the different parts of the photo business.
How much of the behavior change that has happened with photo behavior, with people going more online, more web to print, do you think is going to be permanent? Do you think the landscape has permanently changed? Are people, never going to use photo kiosks again, or walk into a retail store? Or is there going to be, as some people believe, actually a sort of resurgence in that because people are dying to get out of their house?
I think it's if you like, it's a double-edged sword. There undoubtedly will be some consumers that pivoted a lot of their behavior, including any photo printing behavior online, that it will be permanently lost to the retail photo business. And they discovered that whilst they can't necessarily have an immediate print from a kiosk or a mini lab within 24 hours, that my goodness, this is cheap, and guess what, it's a silver halide print, it's pretty good. And they won't come back again. The same, to a lesser extent, because obviously photo books are not really an online purchase proposition, an in-store purchase proposition, but maybe to an extent with cards and some other products as well. So yeah, I think there's a fear amongst the retail community that if we look here in Western Europe, they probably took in the H1, they probably took a 30% dip in revenue because of what was going on with various lockdowns. That won't all be recovered in the second half of 2020, because we're not entirely sure quite how the year ended yet, and B, that they won't necessarily recover all that permanently anyway, but that it won't be a total write-off. There will be some balance again. The kiosk business in Germany, Benelux, France, UK is pretty buoyant when it comes to photo printing, and the fact that so many Generation Z and millennial customers will come and make prints from the kiosk if they just want a handful, and retain relative agnosticism to price, means that we foresee that continuing. I think the back account of Minilab business will bear the brunt of that. It was bearing the brunt of the pivot to the online photo world anyway, even before COVID hit us. So we think that's probably where production wise the biggest hits will occur. And certainly we're seeing, for instance, Boots here in the UK has completely removed all of its mini labs now. It's purely a kiosk and sort of back end photo lab service now. One or two other,
which is run by CVA, right?
It is now, yeah. It's now as of last year, at some point run by CV. Yeah. So yes, there will be an impact on retail. It won't be as devastating as the short-term impact last year, but some of those customers won't return. Some of the online players were saying to me last year, we've suddenly got an extra 30% customer base, but we won't necessarily keep all of them, and they won't necessarily be repeat customers. But our customer base has suddenly spiked massively, and also because there are people that suddenly had time on their hands and decided to do a photo book, order some wall decor, whatever it may be, in the first half of last year. Whether or not that transpired in the second half remains to be seen. I'm hearing some noises that maybe some of Q3 and Q4 had a bit of a knock-on for that, and the orders weren't quite as great as they normally would have been in the busy season.
And considering that customer acquisition is usually among the more expensive activities that a business can have, especially online, it's not so bad actually.
Indeed,
they just acquired all those customers.
I've had this conversation with quite a few people last year and said there's millions and millions of pounds, dollars, euros worth of marketing has just happened, without a cent being spent, basically, in the last few months.
So one of the theories we've been tossing around is the idea that COVID accelerated some of the activity that the market was already experiencing. Like you were talking about, the decline in retail. Retail was already, mini labs were being pulled out of big shops because they weren't justifying the floor space and things like that anyway. Indeed. And people were moving towards mobile phones and apps anyway. Yeah. And it would have, and so it accelerated that behavior. Is there any? Do you see any of that over in Europe?
Yes, definitely. I think there's no doubt that it probably did speed up that curve. You were talking about apps. If we look at the apps, I don't want to obviously push any particular apps as an analyst, but if I take a couple of examples here in Europe, there's the French software company called Clarinova, which is behind the free prints apps, which are also available in the US, and particularly here in the UK, but in other Western European markets as well, they've been incredibly successful, playing on the free word. There's a delivery charge, and an actual charge for the product with prints, then books, then flat cards, wall tiles. I've got a wall tile of me and my partner and my niece here in my room. These kind of things which are becoming popular. And then that's a volume business. There's no doubt about that. There's some volume shifting there, and margins come from value add and sell up and those kind of things. At the other end, you've got very sort of clever tech focused firms like Popster, which is one of the photo book players that's emerged in recent years, which is using AI to target people through social media with ready-made photo books at, again, I guess, relatively competitive prices. And let's say, here you go, here's a photo book from your social media. And again, whilst the figures may be relatively low compared to the photo boxes and and others of this world here in Europe, they're certainly getting some really good traction going, and they're reaching consumers, particularly maybe the millennials. Once millennials start having children, then photos become more important, photo products, in ways that maybe some of the incumbent players are struggling to reach. I remember talking to an online player in the US a few years ago, and they said, we're throwing millions of dollars at the millennials and we're just not getting them. We just don't know how to reach them. And I think that's part of the battle. It's how you reach these potential consumers. And if you look at photo book penetration in Western Europe, it's around 15% of the population. I don't see that means that 85% of the market is untapped and there's going to be a huge explosion in photo books.
Right.
But it's how you reach, some of the sort of Generation X, my generation, but also the younger generations that are coming as well, who will start their journey from a Fujifilm Instax to going to a print kiosk to having a baby and wanting to, have a nice canvas print on the wall or a photo book of the, the baby and those kind of things.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to move into the demographic shifts, as you mentioned before. We say Gen Z over there, it's Gen Z there. So, and of course, millennials. There was this idea, not too long ago, that, print was dying, print was dead, because we can see it all on our phones, we can see it all on our screens. And now the realization, I think, is that, gosh, we live in the real world and we like to see things around us that remind us of our family, friends, experiences, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on a screen. And I think the industry has responded pretty well with coming up with products that are innovative, creative, and affordable. I mean, in terms of wall decor and decoration and things like that. So when it comes to reaching the Gen Zs and the millennials, is it a marketing issue? Is it a convenience issue? Is it a price issue? How can we get that 15%, for example, photo books up to maybe 20%? I think is probably more realistic.
I think it's dependent on all three of those factors without me sitting on the fence too much, but it's also the product itself. And as I say, they'll start their journey by going to a print kiosk, which are much more a significant part of the photo business here in Western Europe than they are in the US, where a lot of the retailers tend to sort of do 1 hour mini lab prints. Not so much the case here. So they'll start their journey with a few kiosk prints, and then they may move forwards from there. They're not necessarily going to be a photo book consumer in their late teens. It's a journey they take, but you see pictures of student dorms where they've all got lots of Instax and Polaroid style photo prints hanging up on a piece of string with pegs. They'll change them regularly. They're agnostic to 70, 80 euro cents, 70, 60, 70p a kiosk print here in this country. And that's the journey they begin, not to be sort of voracious consumers of photo products, but certainly to value some of these physical products that are tangible and things that have some meaning. We take so many pictures now with our smartphones. I was looking at my Christmas pictures, including the fact that for some reason I got a picture of my lunch on Christmas Day, which is completely inconsequential, but amongst those pictures there's a picture of me and my partner walking on a Sunday with my niece, and they're the ones that you want to print, and they're the ones that hold some value, and I guess the same for that generation.
So a lot of people, like you mentioned, Popso and some other companies are trying to use AI to drive that transaction. What is your perception of where AI is in the market?
There's a lot of talk about it, and I'm not belittling it at all. But when you talk to the vendors, I think AI can work very well for a small fleet of foot operator, or smaller, I should say, without belittling them, like Popsa or some of their peers, or for instance, Resnap, which is now part of Our Belly, because that's what they do, and they don't have to worry about operations and production and everything else. That's what they're doing. They're very much at the front end of the market. When it comes to some of the more incumbent photo players that are, I guess, slightly larger, slightly slower turning circles, then the cost of AI and optimizing everything across every single platform and becomes a bit more of an issue. So it's a good thing, but it's not something that sort of one size fits all. It really depends upon the the vendor, if you like, or the e-tailer that's involved in it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think that I've come to grips with the market is that, unlike the early days of photo, right, or on digital photo, like the days of Snapfish and Shutterfly when they first started out, you could be vertically integrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could do your own website, you could do your own production, you could do your own marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, it seems like it's almost divided into like different segments, and that players have to decide what segment they're going to play in. Are they going to be more of a marketing company and outsource their technology and their production? Are they going to be a technology company and outsource their marketing and their production?
Yeah.
Are they going to be a production company and outsource the marketing and the technology?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look here in Europe, you've got some admittedly hugely successful vertically integrated players that I guess would say that they're a front end company that happens to be good at printing, but
Right.
The success stories in recent years, and again I'm talking about relative growth, because none of them yet are, with the exception of Free Prints, which is the largest photo prints reseller now in the UK. They've come a long way in 6 years or so. They're not necessarily biting at the heels of the major players, but the success stories are these smaller fleet of foot, often app-based players who might start app-based and then go online as well, that don't, as you say, don't have all those overheads. They don't even, they will use a third party to act as a buffer between them and the print service provider, even, so that they can focus their energies on trying to capture that customer base, rather than having a miscellany of staff and roles and within the company. So there's no clear direction. I can't say the future is going to be totally app-based and print service provider-based. But if I look at our figures and I look at the percentage of the market that the white label, printing companies hold, then that's growing. That where the growth is in the business, and that's because of cannibalization of retail orders, and also so some of that organic growth has come from some of these apps. It's the white label companies. It's the Harriers and Seves and Fuji Labs, Phipps, as I think they're now called, Orvos and Adcops and all the others of this world that provide those that print service that are probably exhibiting more growth than the rest of the market.
So looking forward, again, I'm old enough to remember film and things like that, and it was always a challenge to get people to carry a camera, use a camera, and process the roll of film, right? And over in the US, the average household processed like 3 rolls of film a year. And actually, there was the big joke where you'd have a Christmas tree on each end of the roll, right? Because people shot 1 roll a year, and
wow,
it was like, and so the household spend of photography was actually on average fairly low. Because 3 rolls of film a year. Yes, there were heavy users and everything else, but in many, there's only 85% of households even had a camera. Many households did not, and nowadays those limitations are pretty much disappeared. Everyone has a camera. Everyone's constantly using it, and also I believe, and I don't know what your numbers would show, but I would say the household spend on photography is actually fairly high for print active households. In other words, people who actually print are spending more than they were, let's say, 20 years ago when it was analog.
I think that's the case. I think if you look at, I don't have any direct statistics on this, but the sense I have very much from the industry is, if you look at the basket size, that is growing. I mean, the upsell is a particular push from the e-tailers and the print service providers. But if we look at photo books, more pages, lay flat silver halide, higher quality digital print, more sophisticated bindings and coverings, and that's all pushing the value up more than the volume in the sector. I think you could argue that technological evolution will do the same with, with wall decor, even with cards, as digital presses have more options for more sophisticated print and embossing and everything else. And even when it comes to good old photo prints, again, the fact that it's not necessarily a 4x6 anymore, that it can be an Instax, Polaroid, whatever it might be, style, or just a different size, or it might be a box of 50 prints in in their own little cardboard box that people will pay more money for. That's all definitely adding value. And I think pushing up that that basket size year on year. I mean, the prints volume is flat. So print volume is declining, value is flat. I mean, that says already, and to an extent, the same with photo books. We continue to see a definitive growth in the value, but the volume is kind of plateauing a little bit.
So moving forward, I think we should look at this as actually a positive trend, right?
It is. It is, yeah.
Because?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, it's our outlook, between 2019 and 2024 is about 10% value growth in the market. We see, these new consumers, taking that journey and potentially expanding from prints to higher value photo products as they have families and their own homes. And this is it's a forecast. Forecasts are always difficult to be totally solid about, but there's a lot of untapped potential. It only takes a print service provider to innovate something. We've seen a bit of a spike in recent years with there's the good evergreen products in photo merchandise like mugs, but phone covers came along and everybody went mad about those. Last year everybody's been going mad about jigsaws. Photo blankets, which are hugely popular in the US, seem to be penetrating some of the Western European markets now. It just takes a killer product for a little while, and you can have a huge and sustained spike in the sector. So our forecasts are, I wouldn't say conservative, but it's very, very hard to say what's coming along, but there could be so much more potential than this in the future as well. And from the point of view of the print service providers, if they homogenize their operation workflow around a completely digital proposition in the future as well, then that could also drive, I guess, cost benefits and sort of trickle down into the marketplace as well. So there's a lot of positivity out there. Good to see, as I say, double digit outlook over the next few years and overall in terms of where the value is heading in the business.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for your time. I look forward to connecting with you again later in the year to hopefully get an update, and hope you have a great early first part of the year.
You too. Thanks very much. Lovely to speak with you.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.